reaction to the book of Ezra. I'm going to talk mostly about the last portion of the book because it's some interesting things that I think just I was thinking about as I was reading through it, and that I think it's a good. This section of the book reminds us of something important when reading the Bible. I think sometimes we have a tendency to interact with Scripture on a specific basis and forget the bigger picture. And the story in the end of the book of Ezra, I think, illustrates this. So the story is such, and if you just read it, you'll know it, but there's a controversy over marriage and who someone is married to, right? And particularly with these Jewish Israelites who returned to the land, to Jerusalem to rebuild the temple, and that they had married foreign wives. And it's a story that doesn't really have a resolution. It's just a story that's there. It's more of an account of what took place rather than an instruction or an editorial on marriage. But a couple of things I want to remind us of to think about. There is instruction in the Torah, in the first 5 books of the Bible, to the Jewish nation, the Israelites, about marriage. And particularly it was surrounding, hey, don't marry someone who's a pagan and adopt their practices. Like, be careful, don't do that. Idolatry and paganism and worship of idols and all of this stuff is something that's warned about, and God says, watch out for this. And so that's a real accurate teaching of Scripture. There is also a teaching that says, listen, anyone is welcome to become part of the family of God. You're welcome in, and we see stories like Rahab, for example. Rahab being a Canaanite pagan who is welcomed in, right? And she's welcomed in because she wants to be a part of the family of God and says, I want to worship the God of heaven, the creator of the universe, the one, the restorer, all of that. And so there's no problem with that. And so we have to realize that that's the reality of the teaching of Scripture that comes into this story. And so then when we evaluate this story, we need to evaluate it on the basis of the totality of the teaching of Scripture. And if I'm going to sum it up just to this point, what we've read so far in the Old Testament, it is that we need to be careful about who we live a life with. And if we are going to live a life with someone who has completely different values with us, there's consequences and difficulties that come with that. And ultimately, I would say that you can make a biblical argument that you shouldn't be marrying someone with a completely different view of God and worship of God and all of that. In the New Testament, it says, we shouldn't be unequally yoked. Don't be out of sync. And I think that's important on things that aren't religious in marriage. But up to this point in the story of the Bible, that's there. There is not, and I think this would be the wrong thing to do, I don't believe the Bible teaches a bloodline purity and that you are holy because of your heritage. That's not there. Now, did people in the Bible think that? And do we have stories in the Bible where people behave that way? Absolutely. But that's not what the Bible teaches, right? It records people with, I would say, practices and understandings that actually go against the biblical history. And so as we look at the stories here with this divorce and forced divorce and this thing going on, it's definitely not an agreement in the story. I think it's important to remember that. And I think there is a beautiful principle. It's that anyone who desires to be in relationship with the Creator God that we see in Scripture, with the one who cares, has an opportunity and is not turned away. But if somebody does not want to be in relationship with that God, and we need to be careful with our decisions as how we do we start a life with someone who has a completely different point of view on that. And I think the Bible would advise us against it. But ultimately, we're looking at this story, right? And it leads to Jesus, and we see Jesus dealing with these things in a practical way and restoring relationships. So I hope you're blessed, and I hope that you continue to read. That's my reaction to the book of Ezra.